A lot of you probably use Windows or Mac. You might be less familiar with Linux. So this is optional. It's kind of a good thing to be aware of. At some point in your career, there's a good chance that you'll start to have to interact with Linux and Unix machines. And so again, it's kind of some computer science background. As I already mentioned, so I already went over this, right? So you have all these components. What I wanted to touch on is this side of things. Mac is very similar to Linux. It's also a Unix-based system, and again, Linux is these two are very similar as you'll see. Why would you want to learn it? For one thing, it's a useful line on your resume. More importantly, the majority of the world's supercomputers are Linux. For one reason, Linux is an open source platform, so it's developed and it's basically free to download. So anyone can install Linux on the machine for free. Whereas Windows, you need a license, you have to buy a licensing. So if you have a supercomputer with thousands and thousands of machines, you have to pay for. It's basically why not use the free software, the free operating system. And also another reason is that you can easily access supercomputers through the command line. So which I'll discuss more on the next slide. So you have your laptop, you open a terminal, which is basically a way to interact with your computer through text rather than through a GUI with a mouse. And then you can get inside. Say you have a computer at George Mason, which is spatially separated from your local machine. You can run this command SSH James at computer at this. You can point to this computer, and then you get inside of it and you see your command line, and then you're sort of inside of that computer, and you can do all whatever you need to run your code and whatnot, as opposed to being inside of your local machine. And the same is true for instead of a computer at George Mason, you might have a computer at NASA or whatever in California. So that you could get inside of that. And you could basically have access to many computers at your fingertips through the command line. The file system of Linux machines typically start at this root directory. So this is where the operating system lives. So you kind of never want to mess around in this space. This is again where the operating system is. If you started accidentally deleting things here, you basically could destroy the Linux computer. Directories are also, so this is kind of jargon. Sometimes you'll hear directories. They're just folders. It's just another name for a folder. And also you'll hear repos, which are Git folders that are hosted on GitHub. So basically there's synonyms: directories, folders, repos, etc. And then there's files, right? Of course. And you can make links as well, which I'll show an example of. Permissions are important. So who gets to see what and who gets to modify it what. So a lot of times if you're just a user, if you were on say a NASA cluster, you wouldn't even be able to modify any of this. You wouldn't have permission. And so if you tried to, it would throw an error and it would contact the system administrator and say so and so tried to do whatever, modify whatever file. And but if you are a super user, then you would have kind of control of the entire computer. So super users are very kind of powerful in that they have complete control of the entire computer, whereas users usually only have control of their home directories, which live in a very special subset. And then inside of this, there's a new directory tree, and you can kind of explore that. Linux permissions, I'm not going to go too much into this. Basically, this tells, there's different codes that tell who can do what to what file. So like 777, you can read, write, and execute, which is actually kind of a dangerous code that gives sort of anyone control of those files, right? And basically any user, anyone can modify that file. So this is kind of a dangerous code, and so you kind of need to be careful what kind of permissions you give your files, and whatnot. So again, you can Google this and get into it. There's a command to change it. So from the command line, you can say change mode a+x file name, which will make a script executable for you. It's commonly used. And if you're a super user, with great power comes great responsibility, because you can basically completely destroy the computer. You can destroy the operating system, then you have to reinstall, and you might lose a lot of data. So you don't want to use the command sudo, which makes you a super user carefully, or you want to be careful when you use it. Again, this is the operating system. It's like a tree directory with hierarchical levels. So for instance, and this is where, this might be a particular user, and there's a few commands that are particularly important. Print working directory shows you where you are in this tree. So if you were here where the star is, and you did print working directory and say home, it showed this path all the way down to the root directory. This slash is the root directory. Home is a file in that root directory, and then you just work your way up. CD ... changes you back one. So if you did CD ... you would go from here back to here, so you'd be in home. And if you did print working directory, it would say home. And then then you can go back up. So if you did CD home, from here to CD home up to work, that would put you here. So again, this is kind of how you navigate the file system from the command line. And here's some additional kind of useful commands. This is not an emphasis of the course, so you don't have to know this. And if you don't have a Linux machine, you can't really even use much of this anyway. But if you have a Mac, then you can. And anyway, there's also a wildcard. LS stands for lists, and so list will show you what's in a folder. Be extremely careful with the wildcard. So if you did remove, that would delete every folder in the file, or in a particular directory. So if you were here and you did remove star, it's going to delete every single file in that folder. If you do remove recursively forced, this stands for recursively forced star, you're going to delete everything in the entire tree. So if you did that in home and you had access, you would delete all the user accounts in that home directory. So again, very, very careful if you ever start to use the wildcard coupled with this remove command. And then the sudo, if you were a super user, if you navigated to this remote directory and you ran this command, you would delete the entire operating system, every single file on the operating system, and that's completely unrecoverable. If you run this, there's no way to reverse this. It'll be completely gone. It literally, everything is gone. The computer would stop working. You'd have to reinstall the operating system. All your data and files would be gone. So again, extremely careful if you're ever using remove. Okay, so I'm going to exit and do just a short demo. So if you're on a Mac, which I am here, you're going to have a terminal. So again, I just open the terminal, I'm inside. So again, a Mac is basically a Unix machine, so I can do CD tilde. So there I just moved and I do print working directory. So I'm in a file called /users James. Let's go to slash. So I'm in the root directory right now. So this is kind of this is Apple's operating system. It lives in this slash directory. And if I started to try and change things here, it wouldn't let me. And there's probably things that I can't even see in here. Like you basically never want to kind of be in this slash space. Again, it's kind of, this is where the operating system lives, and this is where you can really break your computer. Usually you live in, so you go cd users, and then you see one called James Hickman. So now I'm back in my, this is my home directory, which is also the same as cd tilde. So tilde is just a path that defines this home directory. And so there's all kinds of stuff, right? This is just my operating system. So there's a command that says open. So it's standard stuff. So you have application folders, your download folders, your desktop is here. It's just your operating system. It's very kind of ordinary stuff, but I'm interfacing with it through the command line rather than through the file manager window. So let me open a new window. So this is going to take me into, deeper down. I'm in a particular directory, user James. I'm in my Dropbox, and I'm in a folder for Spring 2022 for 503. This is the folder that I shared with you through on Canvas. So there's a bunch of Python codes here. So for instance, and so again, ls is important. LSA will show you hidden files. So there's Max will have this .ds store. You can kind of ignore it. LSLTR will do it. Will tell you a little more information. Shows you the permissions, the dates that things were last modified, etc. I think it does in alphabetical order. Maybe not. And so yeah, and you can. So a few things you can do. If you do this, this will make a new file. So let's call it new.py. So now there's a new file, and currently there's nothing in it. So if I use Sublime Text, let's open that. And so this is in that file. So let's say test hello, save it. Now if I do more, which will show you things inside the command line. So if you do more, yeah, it shows. I think you can also do head, which is similar to like in R. It'll show you some of it. You can also do tail, which will show you the end of the file. So if you do tail, so that's showing me the end of this file. So those are useful commands. It's kind of something that you kind of just learn as you go. You sort of pick it up. Again, I mentioned the wildcard. So if I wanted to list every file that started with TW, I would do ls tw star, and it's going to select those two files. You can run files using Python. So if you say, there, I just opened it. So I just opened this file. So again, in Sublime Text. So here's all of the Python source code. If I want to run that file, let's say, so I need to activate my Conda environment. And so that runs the code, and it'll generate some plots and whatnot. So I typically, you can always use Spider or RStudio. I kind of, because a lot of times, at least in graduate school, I was like constantly on supercomputers and not on my local machine. So if you're on an external machine, you're usually interfacing with it through a command line. So like a lot of times you're editing through this interface, and you're not really using Spider or RStudio. You're probably interacting directly with the file. So again, I kind of rarely use Spider or RStudio or some other IDE, what's it called, Integrated Design Environment, or whatever it stands for. But again, so you can run Python code from here, which I just did. You can also run R code. So the command is rscript rbasics. So that's going to run this rbasics code. Anyway, this is all, again, optional, but it's a useful skill to learn. So if you have a Mac, you already have access to all this. You could just start, exploring this. Just be careful. Again, never do anything like this. And another thing is copy. So useful command copy. So that's going to copy this NumPy basics back one directory. So let's go cd ... more. So I just copied and made this file. So again, it's just a copy. I don't really care about that copy, so I'm going to remove it. Now it's gone. Make a new directory. Let's say there's week 56 if this was, or 54 if this is a 54-week class. And so there you can see it made this week 54. I can go into that. There's nothing. Now let's say new.py. I made a new Python file. Nano. Nano is a command line editor, so I can actually edit without opening Sublime Text. Let's just say print test. So now more. So that's there now. So I can say Python new. It ran it. And so anyway, it's just an alternative way to. And now I don't actually want this, so let's get rid of that. Remove new. Go backwards. This directory I don't care about, so let's remove that because I just made it for a test. So if you want to delete a directory, you have to use this command, this flag, remove, recursively force, and then I pointed to it. Notice that that directory is no longer here, and so this is a kind of a dangerous command. It deleted this folder and everything that was in it. So if there was like a whole bunch of data here, it would delete. It would have deleted all of that. So again, it's kind of a little bit of a dangerous command. You really want to use this carefully, and you really want to back up your work as well because you don't want to accidentally delete things. I think that's everything. One other thing is Git, so you can interact, which I'll actually discuss this more in a few seconds. But another reason I bring this up is you can interact fully with Git through this Git command, which I'll discuss in the next slides. And finally, you can make shell scripts. So let's do that. Let's call it test.sh. Usually shell scripts have the prefix xh. Right now, that's not runnable. That's just a text file, so there's nothing in it. There's nothing special about that. If I do change mode a plus x test, that just made that shell script. Notice that it changed color. It is now an executable script, so because there's nothing in the file, nothing's going to happen. Inside that, though, you can put any Linux command, so for in week star do ls. Linux variables usually get the $ prefix done, so this is going to loop over everything that starts with W. If I did it right, let's see, let's run it. Yes, so it did. So it listed the file. So anyway, so anything that you can do from the command line, like these list commands, you can also put in a shell script and it'll do it incrementally. So that's going to find every file that starts with a W and has a 1 in it, and it's going to list, and it's also going to say, like echo is like a print, that stands for like print, so let's run this. And so, yeah, it listed those files. And that's about it for now. I mean, this is just a very quick introduction to it. Again, this is on Mac, so I'm just inside my Mac. Every Mac has iTerm you can install, but every Mac also has a baseline terminal. Where is it? Inside this folder, I think. Yeah, terminal here. So this is this. I use this other one. This is called iTerm, which has some. It's just an alternative, but also again, this is what I have open now. Just your standard terminal is on every single Mac. It comes with default, and I mean, it's basically kind of how people used to interact with computers, you know, back in the 80s and 90s, or 80s, I should say. One final thing. So let's close this. So I just switch. I use VirtualBox frequently. So I have sometimes I prefer to use Mac and Linux are slightly different. So sometimes I prefer to use VirtualBox rather than or use a Linux environment as opposed to a Mac environment. But they're basically identical. They're very very similar. So again, CD tilde. I'm inside a VirtualBox now. So I just switch. This is hosted on my Mac machine, but like I'm inside sort of a like a machine running inside my machine. So this is kind of its own separate operating system, and I can switch between them. So now I'm on Mac. Now I'm in Linux, and the things are all the same. So like the commands, so I'm in home/jfh, which is the user on this Linux system. I can do all the same thing, make directory test. So just made this directory test. We do cd test. So again, it's everything that I just described. The commands are very similar, and you can do git. So I'll discuss this again more, but you can do like git clone and interact with it, which I'll show in the next tutorial.